Your government does lie to you, and it has since its founding. Do you really think that the government's telling you the truth about what happened with UFOs or the JFK assassination? Of course not. The government lies to you. And that's okay. Some lies are, though, more damaging than others. And our ruling class right now is telling a lie that is imperiling our country. It's a venomous lie. It's a vicious lie. And Joe Biden is using it to drive our nation to the very brink. Here's the question. Where do your rights come from? Your ability to say what you want, to live where you want, to be secure where you live, to own a firearm, due process. You wouldn't want to live without these rights. We often call them our constitutional rights because they're in the Constitution, but this is wrong. This is one of the most incorrect things that conservatives say with regularity. It's a big problem. We need to rethink this. The Constitution does not grant us freedoms at all. God grants us freedoms. Your right to be free, to speak free, existed before social media, before Joe Biden, before America even. God gave it to you. And this is why the founders called your rights inalienable. The definition of inalienable is not capable of being taken away. That's the exact definition. That's why they said your rights pre-exist government. They pre-exist any document in this country. They're endowed to you by your creator. And our government is strictly forbidden from taking them away. This is why it is so dangerous when illiterate tyrants like Joe Biden say garbage like this.
But no amendment to the Constitution is absolute.
During his gun confiscation event at the White House last week, Biden said your rights are not absolute. This is the most dangerous lie in America, period. It's a direct assault on the foundational principles that your rights come from God. This statement desecrates the very founding of our country. By this standard, women in America should not absolutely count on their right to vote, the 19th Amendment. This is not crazy. Joe Biden just said it. Amendments are not absolute. These are his words. What would be the reaction by millions of single cat-owning feminists who voted for Joe Biden when Biden informs them that their right to vote next election is up for grabs? I think I know.
I'm driving in
All right. So how about the 13th Amendment? Do you know what that says? It says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist within the United States. That's the language. Is Biden saying that slavery is not absolutely abolished in America? That people may be put back in chains? It's eerie. Where have I heard that before?
Unchain Wall Street. They're going to put you all back in chains.
Okay, great. Seems like a very irresponsible thing to say, but Biden is a Democrat. He's from the Democratic Party. This is the party that ran internment camps a generation ago. Did you know that our president to this day refuses to call on the blackface-wearing Democratic governor of Virginia to resign? So perhaps we should be worried. This is the big lie, that your rights are up for a vote. They are not. That your rights come from government. They do not. The Supreme Court can only interpret our Constitution, and this often leads to our freedoms being expanded, like gun rights. Gun rights have seen major victories in the Supreme Courts in recent years. In Washington, D.C., all gun ownership was illegal for decades. Thanks to the Supreme Court, that decisive ruling in D.C. versus Heller, it is now legal to own a firearm in Washington, D.C., where I live. I'm very thankful for this. What was the majority judicial reasoning for this case? Self-defense. Self-defense is a universal right. God grants you a right to protect yourself and your family and your property. The government is strictly prohibited from taking away that right. Your right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed because it comes from God. It's the natural order. Shall not be infringed. These are the harshest, most clear words in the Bill of Rights. That is why they are the most hated words by our tyranny class. This is why the tyrant Biden has spent his career obsessed with desecrating your Second Amendment. This is why they lie so much about gun owners. Do not believe the lies. We're going to debunk, actually, right now, the 3 most embarrassing, provable lies that Joe Biden tells in his attempt to desecrate your God-given right to defense. Here is the first one. There has always been restrictions on the Second Amendment. Joe Biden said this. Is it true? No. It is completely and utterly false. Historians and academics agree there's no law banning private ownership of any weapons when the Second Amendment was written. Biden recently said that cannons could not be privately owned during the Revolutionary War. Nonsense! Poppycock! False! Not true! The opposite is true. Cannons were regularly used by private Americans to defend themselves and their property. University of Pennsylvania law professor Kermit Roosevelt said, and I quote, "You would need to point to something, a law or a tradition or a case, where someone was not allowed to possess a cannon." Sounds kind of awesome. I kind of want a cannon now. Furthermore, the Second Amendment was ratified in 1791. Time magazine says the first gun control efforts in America happened in 1934. That's 150 years after the Second Amendment was ratified. So no, there were no restrictions when the Second Amendment was passed. Blew a hole right in that lie. Let's move on to the next one. Here's the next lie. When the Second Amendment was ratified, they just had single-shot muskets. False. False. Multi-round automatic or semi-automatic weapons existed in the 1700s. This is demonstrably true. Some of these weapons were even presented to Congress a decade before they ratified the Second Amendment, so Congress knew about these style of weapons. The Belton Flintlock, very cool gun, was presented to the Continental Congress in 1777. The weapon was a musket that could fire 8 rounds with one loading. So Congress knew of a gun that fired more than 1 round, and they ratified the Second Amendment anyway. But it's not just the Belton Flintlock. The Ferguson rifle was a breech-loading rather than muzzle-loading rifle. It could fire up to 7 rounds per minute, 3 times faster than any muzzle-loading weapon of the day. This was considered a rapid-fire weapon and was used by the British against the Americans in the Revolutionary War. Our founders went up against rapid-fire weapons in the war, and they still did not ban them. Finally, the Puckle Gun. This one's so cool. We just had to use this one. The Puckle Gun was a tripod-mounted, single-barreled flintlock weapon with a revolving cylinder that held 6 to 11 shots. The gun was patented, get this, 80 years before the Second Amendment was ratified. So no, it is historically illiterate to say that only single-shot muzzleloaders existed. The final lie is this: Americans buy guns without background checks. There's no rules. This is false. There is a mandatory federalized systems for nationwide background checks and gun purchases. I read directly from the FBI website. When a person tries to buy a firearm, the seller, known as a federal firearms licensee, FFL, contacts the NICS electronic system. The NICS system is the background check system. The NICS staff performs a background check on the buyer. That background check verifies the buyer does not have a criminal record or isn't otherwise ineligible to purchase or own a firearm. However, there is a loophole in this system, and this is it, that scumbags and criminals can, on occasion, lie on their federal background checks. This is wrong. But it's exactly what Hunter Biden, the president's son, did. Hunter Biden, there is hard proof that he lied on his federal background check about his addiction to substances, well-known addiction. This is indeed a felony. Then Hunter Biden let that gun get disposed of in a public dumpster. Yeah, that's also illegal. You can't just throw a weapon onto the street. So here's a question, Mr. President, President Biden. If you are serious about strengthening background checks in this country, have the FBI arrest Hunter. Put your son in jail because he is exactly the scofflaw that you're looking for here. He's exactly the person that flagrantly flies in the face of our laws and makes this country a more dangerous place. But how could Joe Biden allow such irresponsible gun ownership, you ask? Check out this clip.
And I promise you, as I told my wife, we live in an area that's wooded and somewhat secluded. I said, Jill, if there's ever a problem, just walk out on the balcony here or walk out, put that double-barrel shotgun and fire 2 blasts outside the house. I promise you, who's ever coming in is not going to, you don't need an AR-15. It's harder to aim, it's harder to use, and in fact, you don't need 30 rounds to protect yourself.
That
Buy a shotgun.
Definitely looks like Joe Biden used a lot of guns. Yeah. All right, here's a note. Don't do that, okay? Don't do that. Don't just, when it's dark out and you're scared, start shooting your weapon into the night. That's a recipe for manslaughter, all right? It's dangerous. But this has nothing to do with safety. This has nothing to do with your safety specifically. It has everything to do with a godless Democratic Party desecrating the rights your creator gave you to engorge their own power. And why are Democrats okay with this? Because data shows that Democrats are actually far less likely to believe in God. So why wouldn't they work why would they work to defend rights given to you by God? So when Joe Biden comes for your gun or your God-given right to self-defense, your God-given right to speech, your God-given right to privacy, I implore you, America, respond like this man.
Hell no. Come on. To the no, no, no. Hell to the no.
Your God and your country are counting on you.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news channel, now in more than 70 million homes. You can get Newsmax TV on your cable system or check your cable guide. And if your system doesn't carry Newsmax, call them, tell them you want Newsmax TV, because we're real news for real people.